Representative Ted Budd, thanks so much for your time. We appreciate it. I want you first to take me back to last week. This was the first week of your third term. I'm sure you didn't expect it would turn out quite like it did.
No, we knew there would be crowds in DC, and we knew it was a tense moment. It was, again, 3 days after swearing in for the 117th Congress. Of course, you know, it had COVID protocols, so that made it a little different for the tenure of different people than how long they had been there and for swearing in. But 3 days later, it would be very chaotic. And, you know, the first thing I saw early that morning, I went for a walk before 8 a.m. and I saw people that had Hong Kong and Taiwan flags that were there. So it was really, for most people, it was really about freedom when they were there. And then it was very tragic what happened. And I absolutely want to condemn the violence in very explicit terms. That's not who our country is. It's not representative of what I'm about, and it's not representative of our country.
You were on the House floor debating Arizona's electoral vote. Walk through that experience from the time you first realized something was happening outside of chamber doors that wasn't right.
Well, you could see the movement of the Capitol Police and the Sergeant of Arms on the floor. They did remove Speaker Pelosi. And of course, that's very common. You know, they'll substitute her out with a temporary speaker. And then they closed the doors and they made an announcement. They asked us they said they would be using some tear gas. So they asked us to use gas masks and get those ready. Of course, you know, some members you have different reactions. You can see the fear on some. You know, some of us stepped up to help others. And then they did open if you would look at the speaker's left hand, that's you know, we were able to exit there. The terrible incident where the Capitol Police or the Sergeant of Arms, actually, there was a lady that was shot. That was to the speaker's right hand, 20 feet behind her. Very, very unfortunate all around, and all the incidents that led up to that. You know, Meghann, my speech had words quoting Democrat Barbara Lee, who was an objector in a prior election. And interestingly, as we're going arm in arm and I'm helping members down the stairs, and I realize I'm arm in arm with Barbara Lee. And so we're neither Republicans or Democrats at that point. And even though it was a very partisan event, and it has been in elections past, and you know, that was a sweet moment amidst the chaos. But you just want to make sure that not just members of Congress, but staff there, janitors, custodians there, that they're all okay. Yeah.
And I imagine your first thought was get in touch with Amy Kate, let her know that what she's seeing unfold on national television, you know, is happening, but I'm safe.
You want to let them know with a quick text when you can, but you're looking around and make sure people are okay on the stairs. They're actually, you know, people are remaining calm and doing what they need to do. And you want to look out for others in those times.
So we'll come back to that in a moment, but I want to reference the tweet that you sent last night saying, quote, trying to impeach a president with less than 10 days left in office is the worst way to lower the temperature in our country. Do you feel the president should face any repercussions for what happened last Wednesday for his role in encouraging the march to the Capitol? And do you feel he should potentially be allowed to run for office again?
You know, there's a lot of layers in that question, and it was a very complex day. And it was very sad. I absolutely, again, I want to say I condemn the violence. That's not who our country is. Free and open debate is who our country is. Like he had the right to speak. I really wish the rhetoric had been turned down. And I'm not for impeachment right now or 25th Amendment. I think we need to focus on a peaceful transfer of power. Let's have January 20th. Let's have the swearing in and the inauguration, and then let's move on as a country. And we need to look at election integrity. A lot of people are demoralized. Most Republicans and up to 30% of Democrats think there were major problems in this last election, November 3rd, and the days leading up to it and shortly thereafter. And the days after the swearing in, we need to start looking to next elections and making sure that people trust the system and that we can preserve our representative democracy.
You brought up several key points there. I want to mention the peaceful transition of power. Many of the replies to your tweet that I was seeing on Twitter were like this one from Hanya, who seemed to take issue with your call for unity. She said, if impeaching Trump would hurt our unity as you claim, then what did you and the GOP think of challenging Biden's election win would do? How do you respond to that?
Thank you. Yeah, like my statement before, this is a very bipartisan process. And if you go back to the election of 2000, Ruth Bader Ginsburg in December of 2000 actually said January 6th is the date of ultimate significance. So I just, it's a mystery to me why people are fine with January 6th until it deals with the current president. This has been something that's been objected to over the years, not every election, but not infrequently. We've had objectors regarding the Ohio electoral votes last time, and then Florida before that. And look, this happens. It's a constitutional process. It's an Article 1, Article 2, the 12th Amendment, the 20th Amendment. So it's a very clear process. Yes, it's tense, but the founding fathers placed this so that we could air out and have a peaceful transfer of power. So that's what we're about, is about debate, and challenging that is part of debate. We've got a great process, and we were just following that.
So I read your objections. I watched your videos that you posted both leading up to and during the objections. You know, you cited voter irregularities like ballots accepted after Election Day, no excuse absentees, yet North Carolina, under its own Supreme Court ruling, accepted eligible ballots 9 days after Election Day. And we do have no excuse absentee voting. So help me understand where you see a difference in the process by states.
Look, I think 9 days beyond election in North Carolina is not a good idea. I think we need to have better procedures leading up to that. When you look at a much bigger state like Florida, perhaps 50% bigger than North Carolina, and they're able to get everything in and call the election very orderly by 9 p.m. Without any fraud. I mean, they fixed problems that were there 20 years ago. I think whether it's North Carolina, which was not a contested state, or some of the 6 contested states, they need to have great processes that people trust, that we don't have to go back and challenge. And look, while North Carolina was not a contested state, there are things we can do to make it even better, even more trustworthy.
So are you saying that you would have contested these 6 states to which you did contest, even if President Trump had won those states, then, if your issue is with the voting processes in the states?
Well, that's a hypothetical, and we'd have to go back and look. I mean, it all turned out very differently. We'd have to look and see what transpired.
So what did transpire in Georgia is going to have an implication for years to come. Republicans just lost both of those U.S. Senate runoff seats in Georgia. Even Senator Perdue, who led by 2 points on election night, had 200,000 fewer votes the second time around. Do you feel like much of President Trump's base, who also voted for you, is now so convinced the voting process isn't fair that they might be deterred from turning out in the future?
That's very concerning. You don't want people, whether they're Democrats or Republicans or whatever base to a particular candidate, are demoralized and think that the system doesn't work. We as Americans want to make sure that the system works. And I wouldn't break that down by party. We want to make sure it's fair for those on either side.
Not only is America divided, the Republican Party seems deeply fractured right now. Those who staunchly support the president, even now, and those who don't, but closely align with that conservative platform and that conservative ideal. How does the party move on from here, rebuild and rebrand?
Well, I think we need to focus on the next 8 or 9 days, make sure there's a peaceful transfer of power. And then we get beyond that. And we look to next elections. And this is really not about a particular candidate. While it may have been in recent days and recent years, we need to look to the platform that we stand for. And I believe our ideas still give the most people, the most diverse array of people, the best life. And so that's what we want to support. I think this gives the most freedom. I think this gives the most opportunity for all. And so I think we have a great platform, and we don't want to confuse that with any candidate. We want to make sure that our ideas are the ones that persevere, because they bring the most freedom and perseverance for a nation.
And last question on this topic before we move on. We've just received the FBI memo warning of possible unrest in all 50 state capitals. The National Guard is now fully on standby in DC for any Inauguration Day problems. What is your message to constituents, not only here in your state of North Carolina, but also those who feel like they want to go to DC and either support the inauguration or peacefully protest? How can this peaceful transition of power happen on January 20th?
I would encourage wherever someone is on either side of the political spectrum, let's stay home and let's be people of peace. There's a lot of dry tinder on the ground right now. There's a lot of hurt out there. Let's acknowledge that. Let's have a peaceful transfer of power. Let's look to the future. Let's take care of our neighbors right now. And I want to absolutely condemn any violence in the past related to this or anticipated in the future. Let's stay home. Let's be great neighbors. Let's be great citizens, and let's move on.
Let's move on to COVID. Your plan for COVID and Congress's plan to tackling the ongoing issues affecting people all across America. Triad County health departments are overwhelmed. If you've kept up with the headlines locally in the past week, people can't get through to the county health departments to make an appointment for the vaccines. They're seemingly not rolling out fast enough, or these health departments don't have the personnel. How can Congress help states like ours get this vaccine rolled out faster and finally get a handle on COVID-19?
Well, it's really down into the logistics now. We have multiple choices for vaccines, and this has happened 5 times faster than any approval before. This is an amazing rollout with Operation Warp Speed. But now it's down to the ground level and making sure that people get the injections. So I want to make sure that in Congress, we're hearing bills passed or suggested, like, can dentists, those who certainly are qualified to give an injection, can they be the ones that administer it? So I think we need to actually make sure that there's enough production out there, and to make sure that that those who are capable of administering vaccines or shots, that they have access. You don't want to have a bottleneck at the point of care, and it seems like that's what's happening right now. And so this is about logistics, and this is about planning at a local level. And I think this is just a disruptive time, and we're going to get through this. The vaccine's going to get out to those who need it.
This is also a time a lot of people are waiting for much needed stimulus money. Over your last 2 terms, you voted mostly in line with the president's position on key issues. However, you voted no to the so-called Cash Act, H.R. 9051, to help increase stimulus payments from $600 to $2,000. Tell me why, and if you have a better plan to get necessary money to not only struggling individuals and families, but also businesses.
Well, so first of all, I absolutely supported the PPP and the renewal of the PPP, the Paycheck Protection Plan. We want to make sure we help those businesses that are most in need. But when it comes to individuals, there's some that actually don't need help. I'm willing to actually give more than the $2,000 if it's targeted to someone who is in a particular industry or they've been hurt some way and they need help. We just don't want to give it out to those who may have never missed a paycheck and never had an additional expense in the past 10 or 11 months. We want to make sure that it's targeted, and we can be a lot smarter than just throwing cash out to everyone when there's actually those out there who need more than the $2,000, and we're willing to do that if it's targeted and has a proven need.
So how would you target it? What would your suggested threshold be?
Well, we'd have to look and see, were they in a particular industry that hasn't come back from COVID? I have an act, it's the Save Our Servers Act, related to restaurants and opening, and the municipalities that have very draconian rules for restaurants, which have, less than a 2% infection rate coming from COVID related to restaurants. And why are these municipalities locking them down and hurting those who need that money? If they're cooks, if they're small business restaurant owners, or if they're servers, we want to make sure that people aren't tightening down on them regulatory wise locally when they should be allowing them to open and provide for their neighborhoods. So things like that, if they're in those industries that have been hurt, we want to make sure we help people like that. And that's just one example.
And I want to ask you about regulations now in the form of censorship in light of Facebook's and Twitter's suspension of President Donald Trump's account, cloud services, eliminating the app Parlay from its platforms. You are again pushing to take on big tech to limit Section 230. Explain the legislation you're reproposing, essentially now targeting censorship on big tech companies.
So this really goes back to the Communications Decency Act of 1996. A lot of these technologies that we're seeing now were just getting started. The internet was fairly new to most of us. And it says, are they a platform or are they a publisher? And what we're seeing right now, we wanted to give them the freedoms of a platform where they weren't responsible for the content on their platforms. But now we're seeing them pick and choose. We're seeing them shadow ban. We're seeing them censor. We're seeing them completely deplatform the President of the United States. If they can do that, they can do it to you and me, and they can do it to just regular citizens out here. And we think that's very unfair. So we have to take the lens of the First Amendment and how do they apply to private companies? The First Amendment is that the government can't restrict free speech, but we got to evaluate it in this new world and deal with Section 230 and that they pick or choose a platform or publisher. And that's what some of my legislation looks at. And we'll be looking at this in the coming days. And this was all before the recent deplatforming of the president.
Come January 20th, it's going to be an uphill battle for you and a lot of your colleagues to get some of your specific legislation through a Democrat-controlled House, Senate, and administration. How do you plan to effectively work with the Democrat-controlled Congress?
Well, if you go back to the first month of last Congress, we had a Democrat-controlled House, and I passed a financial services bill. That's my committee. And the very first bill was a bipartisan bill that was spoken on behalf of by Maxine Waters. So while I'm a true conservative, I can actually work with those on nonpartisan issues across the aisle. There's a lot of things, 80%, let's say, of things that just aren't partisan, but it's the partisan stuff that really gets our attention. But there's things that's better for our country, things that give people more opportunity, more financial freedom. And those are the things that we can work together on. And I've certainly proven that I can do that.
And last question, as I know you're on a time crunch, but it is part of the national conversation and the national dialogue now, and it's going to be in the days and weeks and months ahead on race and the response to what happened at the Capitol. There are people who feel there was a double standard in the police response to the unrest that unfolded at the Capitol compared to, say, the unrest at a Black Lives Matter protest that was in DC just last summer. Do you see a disparity in the response, and what are the next steps going forward?
Well, I've called for a full investigation into the events on January 6th. We can certainly look at that. But again, at that moment, when the Capitol was being invaded by some violent protests, we weren't Republicans or Democrats. We weren't any particular color. We were all there to help each other out. The Capitol Police, of course, there's going to be investigations into the breach, but those men and women on the ground, they weren't black or white or any particular race at the time. We were all Americans.